Welcome, everyone. Welcome to UUCP. My name is Mary Beth. I'll be your service leader today. My pronouns are she and her. First, before we get going, turn to a neighbor and say, it's a great day to do a good deed. Always. Okay, so we have a couple of announcements. Before I get that out of the way, please silence all the things that make all the noises. Thank you so much. We have lots of good music, a great speaker, and no disruptions, right? Okie dokie, just a couple of announcements. Haley, do you want to come up? She has a short announcement too, and while she's working her way up, please make the announcement, oh, that's me, that next Sunday, October 8th, is Sunday Sweets. Yes. Thank you, Michael. If you have any questions, you can ask Michael or anybody that's been here for longer than a month. Sunday Sweets is a little fundraiser for us to raise some funds, and also if you're new, you get a free piece of something, so bring new people. Okay, Haley?
Just want to introduce myself real quick. My name's Haley Collier. I'm a new member, just joined last week, but I've been coming for quite a while since Julie Kane was our minister. Anyways, I wanted to make an announcement. We will be doing fall camp out this year. It's going to be Veterans Day weekend. We're going to check in Thursday night, and we'll be checking out Saturday evening. So it's the 9th, 10th, and 11th. We will either be at the Vincent's Cabin again. It is on the market, so we don't know whether we'll have sold or not yet. And then if that does not work, we have a campsite we can use. Mark, one of our new members, helped me find it. It's in Munson, Florida. There are restrooms and showers, but it is camping, tent camping only. So just put it on your calendars and we will let you know which one we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Lastly, I have an announcement from the Sunday Services Committee. So we have a lovely group of volunteers that kind of oversee the service leaders and the speakers and just make sure that y'all have something to listen to every Sunday when you come. Thank you to those who volunteer. So they're always wanting to make sure that we're happy and satisfied with the service. So one of the questions that's been brought up is our nice little seating arrangement here. Is this comfortable to you, or do you prefer the other way? So raise your hand maybe if you like this, if you're comfortable with this arrangement. Yes? Okay, an enthusiastic yes? Okay, and then maybe raise your, well, I guess I can get a good, we'll just, okay, raise your hand if you like the kind of old school, row seating. Nothing wrong with old school. I love old school. Okay. Thank you so much for the service committee folk. Hopefully y'all were paying attention. If not, I'll relay the message. So, okay. So I lit the chalice lighting in haste, but I think that's like good vibes, to get us going. But just as kind of some opening words, I love the Cornel West quote. It's super simple, but man, does it hit hard. He said, never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. So, right? Oof. Thank you. Okay. Now, if you're willing and able, to stand and we'll say our covenant. Love is the spirit of the church, and service is law. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And if you would like to stay standing, we'll have the choir come up and we're going to sing our opening hymn. So it's in the Teal book, this one right here, and it's number 1017, 1017, Building a New Way.
We are building
Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, we're going to collect our offertory. So if you don't know, this is solely member funded. So everything we do is funded by our members, you. So we appreciate anything that you're willing and able to give, whether that be time, treasure, or talent. Thank you so much, and we'll have our greeters just pass the baskets around. And at this time, we will sing the children out, if you'll help me with that. Go now in peace, go now in peace, may the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. And choir, if y'all want to come up. We have very special treats and special music by Pat Gleich and Teresa Everett. Okay, it's my privilege to introduce our guest, Pat Gleich. I think a lot of y'all know her pronouns are she, her, hers, but I think everybody almost knows her. But she teaches at sociology at UWF. She and her wife Carla, who just led us up here, moved to a small farm near Milton in 2009 from Indiana, and they joined this congregation. Their families include three much adored canines, 4 equines, and 1 cantankerous cat. They proudly define themselves as justice-minded feminists and believe each of us has the capacity to make society a better place for all. And as Carla is fond of saying, Pat talks and she sings. Please welcome Pat.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary Beth. Can you hear me? No. Now? Okay, I'll just start talking. A couple of months ago, Carla and I were at Radio Live, and Deidre McCullough was one of the singers. And she said that she had a new song that was on a new album, and she was going to do it, and it's the song that was our special music this morning. This is the first time it's actually been performed in this kind of a setting. Deidre sings it when she tours, but she was gracious enough to give us the words and the music and wish us luck. And I do not get along well with microphones. That is a given here. So anyhow, when we heard this song, the words fit so well what I was planning to talk about today. And to kind of piggyback on what Nancy said, we do stand on the shoulders of UUs who came before us. And the mission, the covenant of Unitarian Universalism is one that is inclusive and is accepting and does long for justice. And that is kind of what I want to talk about today. I don't know, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, I don't know how many people came to UU by choice as opposed to being cradle UUs, but I'm going to guess that a lot of people probably came from other religious groups that were creedal, that is, somewhere incorporated into the service was a creed that talked about belief in certain things that related to deity, typically Trinitarian deity. We are set apart from creedal religious traditions because we are a covenantal religious tradition. And as every time we gather, we recite the words of the covenant. It is a promise of how we will treat one another, and of aspiration as far as the world we want to see. So that sets Unitarians apart from other groups. I also don't know how many of you know the history of UUA, but until 1961, there were 2 separate organizations, the Unitarians and the Universalists. And they shared a lot of things in common. And somewhere around the late 50s, they started talking and said, maybe we should join together here. And so in 1961, they formally merged and became the Unitarian Universalist Association. And they pulled together the common elements from each organization and became one. They were old organizations. The Universalists had been around in the U.S. since the 1970s. The Unitarians had formed formally in 1825, but had been much stronger in Europe before this time. So they merged then. One of the things that was a strong element of both was a commitment to social justice. And it is that commitment to social justice that I'm going to highlight in this presentation. Now, one of the things I learned a long time ago is when you volunteer to do a presentation on a topic, you really have to study it. And so I learned a lot as I was putting this presentation together. And I want to tell you that I could talk for a week, but I won't, on what I learned. And there's even more, and I'm going to learn more. But this, so far, I tried to pull out elements that related to social justice. I did not include everything because, as I said, I could talk for a week, but I tried to pull out some particular issues that I thought showed an historic commitment to particular causes or particular beliefs, and we now still have a continuing commitment to those same. One of the things I've learned about UU, and I knew this before now, is UUs are a big tent. By a big tent, I mean UUs include people who come from different traditions, and we do not require the people who come from specific other traditions to leave their historic or traditional beliefs at the door. We are inclusive. And so the big tent is, we don't all believe everything the same way. We don't look at things exactly the same way. But thankfully, one of the things UUs do agree on is this idea of justice and justice for all. And whether UUs call themselves a church, and some like ours do, or a society or a fellowship, the common story is there. I have no faith in PowerPoints, so if you see me looking over my shoulder, it's just to be sure that it actually moved. So, one of the things that has been an historic part of Unitarian Universalism is a commitment to the freedom of people. And so, in the U.S., in the late 1700s, early 1800s, up to mid-century 1800s, a number of the people who were involved in the Underground Railroad and who espoused the theory of abolition, doing away with slavery. This was very common among Unitarians. Not all Unitarians, but many Unitarians. And just as an example, the congregation in New Bedford, Mass., which is now First Unitarian, but it was merged from a congregational congregation and another Unitarian group. They were very active in the Underground Railroad. One of the members, Mary Johnson, and I couldn't find a photo of her, just the silhouette. She and her husband Nathan hid people. They had a large house. Actually, they had several properties, and they had a large house with a basement. And so they hid people who arrived in boxes and in other kinds of contrivances, leaving the South. And one of the people who they helped resettle was Frederick Douglass. See him here. But this congregation was very active and kind of representative. We're going to fast forward all the way to the 1960s. And we see UUs having a significant role in the march from Selma to Montgomery. And that's just up the road. I don't know if any of you have followed that pathway, the march from Selma, across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, up the 35 or so miles to Montgomery. This was a very significant movement or point in the movement toward voter rights. It was a Martin Luther King-led march. It was to be a Martin Luther King-led march. A call went out to religious groups to come from all over the country. UUs answered. Other denominations did as well. But today I'm talking about UUs. So two of the people who came, Reverend James Reeb came from Boston, and Viola Luiso came from Detroit. Reverend Reeb came early. Unfortunately, he and two other UU pastors were walking one evening down the street in Selma, and they were attacked by a mob of Klansmen. And Reverend Reeb was injured. He was beaten in the head, and because he was in Selma and he was there supporting African Americans who were part of this march, he was not allowed to be picked up in a white ambulance because ambulances were segregated back then, as were hospitals. And so it took hours to find transportation for him to go to Birmingham, where he was treated and fell into a coma and died. So that was his story. Viola managed to complete the march. She drove down from Detroit. She took the family car, drove down from Detroit, and allowed the organizers of the march to use her car to help transport people who were ill or who were elderly and couldn't make the march. And so after the group got to Montgomery, she was then, along with another march organizer, was ferrying people back to Selma. And in the evening, as they had dropped off a group of people in Selma and were going back to Montgomery to get yet another group, a car full of Klansmen followed them down the road, ran them, pushed their car off the road, and they shot and killed her. So two of our UU representatives in this most famous and important march were martyred there. Now, I know UUs, we don't have saints, but we do have martyrs. And these two people were killed there. And I think maybe their voices are still with us. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart. Fast forward, Charlottesville, Unite the Right. Our then president, Susan Frederick Gray, was there with representatives from other religious traditions. And they stood against the right-wing, fascist, neo-Nazi, white supremacist, whatever groups gathered, and were taunted, and were ridiculed, and they stood. I want to read just a little bit. I don't like reading, but I want to read just a little bit of Susan Frederick Gray's remarks, because I think her message is important when we're looking at the movements that we're seeing in the country today, the increase in hate crimes, the increased division. So she said, it's not enough to intellectually want to change the world, and then shrink when that change calls us to take risks, to show up, to sacrifice to protect one another. It was important for me to show up and follow that challenging call at the heart of our faith, to embody the fierceness of love in the face of hate and violence. It's not enough to want to change the world. Continuing in that vein, UU's in 2020 made a formal effort to look at how the denomination, how the organization can change to be more inclusive. And there was a study, actually I think the study was commissioned in 2017, but it was a study to look within UU what needs to be done to be more inclusive, to do outreach, to be more diverse. And so this report came out in 2020, and I read through the recommendations, and sometimes reports come out and people read them and say, oh, this is really good, and they put it over here. This report not only includes recommendations for what the organization, the association needs to do to change, but action steps that need to be taken. And so those are being implemented. So it is, we are not just looking at the message we have to the community needs to change. We also are looking inward at what the congregation needs to do. Okay, now I'm going to switch to another area where UUs have historically been active, and that's in the area of women's rights. Many of the suffragists, the women who worked for rights, the right to vote, the right to be seen as a full participant in society. Many of them were Unitarian or had ties to UU. I listed them, and that's not an all-inclusive list. Those were just some of them. Most of the people who were involved in leadership positions were white. An example who was not white was Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, who was a member of the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia. She often argued with the leaders of the suffragist movement because she felt as though women of color were being excluded. And in large part, she was right. The women who were leading the cause to win the vote, the white women, wanted to keep Deckard white. They didn't want to, quote, dilute the cause by bringing in the question of whether there should be universal suffrage for everyone, including people of color. And so they kind of, the African American women who participated in the marches were kind of put into the back. They kind of looked like an afterthought. But she was very stalwart in her commitment to educating so that people would understand the importance of this being inclusive. But women marched. Unitarian women marched. And I thought earlier this morning I might have seen an apparition of Lucy Stone when I was wandering around earlier.
As we go marching, marching in the beauty of the day, in darkened kitchens, a thousand millloaves gray are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses.
We probably think of the suffragist movement as really focusing on the right to vote for women, and that was clearly at the center of their efforts. But women also worked on ancillary causes like trying to instill laws that would limit labor of children, because there were none. The first law that actually gave any definition to a point at which children would be allowed to work wasn't passed until 1960. And it came out of these efforts. I found a record of two sisters, Jean and Kate Gordon, who were from First Unitarian New Orleans, just down the road. They are the ones on the right here. Your right, my left. And they worked to improve the sanitation system in New Orleans. Now that may sound like a sort of an indirect thing to be doing that's helpful, but one of the things that has allowed our life expectancy to increase as it has is having good sanitation systems, because a lot of the contagious diseases that killed people at young ages were communicated through non-sanitary conditions. So they did something important, even though not quite as glitzy as some of the other things women worked for. Something else I want to mention, talking about women's rights, is the ordination of women. We know there are very publicly still some contemporary religious groups who do not ordain women, who fall on biblical references, scriptural references that say that women should be silent. Apparently you women did not get the message about being silent. Because as there was overlap between the suffragists and women who wanted to be in full ministry, we saw women who were determined. And one of those was Olympia Brown, and she was the first woman to be ordained and officially recognized as ordained and settled with the congregation. And she was settled with the congregation in 1863. She had to convince the seminary president where she went to school, and I didn't write it down, so I forgot it, where she went to school. She had to convince the president to admit her, and then once she completed, and she did very well, she had to convince the president that she was worthy of ordination. And they sent her out to do some sample work in the pulpit, and her preaching was so good, the seminary president had no choice but to go ahead and allow her ordination to continue. Even so, the process of ordaining women was very slow. However, Unitarians were kind of ahead of everybody else. Most mainstream denominations in the U.S. did not officially start ordaining women, and it was grudgingly ordaining women until the 1950s and 60s. Some still haven't, but those who have in the 1950s and 60s. Today, or at least the most recent statistic I could find was in 2017, 58% of the ordained ministers in UU are women. Now, they're increasing in other groups as well, but UUs are sort of the head of the pack there. The church, by the way, is the Olympia Brown Unitarian Universalist Church in Racine, Wisconsin, and that's where she served near the end of her ministry. So I thought that was kind of cool that it's now named after her. So when we look at women's rights, we look at freedoms, we look at ordination, and today we look at reproductive rights, women's rights to control their bodies, and UUs are still there and are still marching on the side of freedom for women. The last area I want to talk about is LGBTQAI plus rights. Again, ahead of the pack, UUs started talking in the 1970s about recognizing LGBTQ, what then would have been LGBT people, or LG people. There was a survey conducted of members in 1967, and about 70% of the UUs thought it was wrong to be gay. Rather than take that as, well, we'll better leave that issue alone, the leadership of the church said, all right, we have to do some educating about that. And so there was curriculum developed, and there were efforts made to allow people to understand why it was important for UUA to be inclusive. And the first gay person was ordained in 1970, again, decades ahead of other denominations. And the first openly transgender person was ordained in 1988. In 1989, the Welcoming Congregation program was initiated. We are a part of the Welcoming Congregations, as are somewhere around 90% of the UU congregations. And so we have seen ideas shift, views shift, and an embrace of LGBTQ people. The most recent work in this area is being done around trans people. If you watch the news and you see what's happening legislatively with making gender-affirming care illegal, and generally denying rights and denying the identity of people by things like book bans, you can see that. The climate in the U.S. has not been conducive and generally welcoming.
We are justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives. We are justice-seeking people, and we are singing for our lives.
Thank you. Because I've already taken more time than I should, quickly, I want to just, in summation, say that the justice work in UU continues, and UU wisely employs at least 3 major approaches to justice work. The first is awareness and education. We can't support that which we don't know and understand. Direct action, that is showing up, being present when it's necessary. And the piece that we may not be as aware of is the legal work that goes on behind the scenes. The UUA sends supportive statements to causes or around causes that are important. And perhaps even more importantly, when there are cases in the courts, and we're seeing increasing numbers of cases working up through the court system that have the potential to take away rights that we already have. The UU sends amicus curiae briefs, friend of the court briefs in support of issues for equality and justice. And so all of the cases, all of the civil rights, human rights cases that have come along in at least the last 20 years, because I looked there on the website, you can read them. The UU has been there. Okay. Okay. Current justice priorities, and I'm ending here. Climate justice, I haven't talked about that, but UU has been there for that. Democracy and electoral justice, UU the vote, other efforts. Working in the area of criminal justice, working toward decriminalization, and working here on immigration and supporting pathways for immigrants to become naturalized. And then the whole LGBTQIA+ and gender justice. There are new programs that are coming out to support them. So Thank you. I hope this wasn't all information you already knew. I hope some of this was new to you. And I appreciate your attentiveness.
Thank you so much. Okay, if you're willing and able to stand with us and sing our closing hymn, and we'll have the choir come up. And while they do, after the service, we'll have just some refreshments and coffee, thanks to our coffee and refreshments team. It's just around the corner there, and we'll socialize and talk about the wonderful service. Oh, it's in the blue book. Yep, page 155. This big one here. Yep. The dark blue. Great.
Closing words are from Lisa Ward, who is a pastor with a UU pastor in Hartford, Connecticut. Bring yourselves into community. Believe in the wisdom you carry. Give yourself voice. You may be surprised by its wisdom. Hear another into speech. You may be moved to a new understanding. Enter the dance of covenant, grounded in the trust of wisdom and love to guide our way. Go in peace and seek justice always.